Hey everybody, I'm Parilee, and as Ethan mentioned, I run product here at Bread. Bread, for those of you who are not familiar with us, is a point-of-sale lender, and we integrate with e-commerce sites to enable them to offer their customers loans as a way to pay for more expensive goods and services that they're purchasing. We're really happy to be hosting Cambrian, the second event in New York, here today. And many thanks to Ethan and to our awesome office and culture manager, Brittany, for putting this event together tonight. What I'm planning to talk about today is something that I see as a core tenet of a lot of what we think about in fintech. And what that is how you take the incredible complexity that has evolved out of a millennia of financing space and make that simple for consumers. So first, consumer finance is complex and it is scary, especially scary for end consumers who don't know anywhere near as much about it as all the people here in this room. And lending, which is the area that I'm most familiar with, is particularly intimidating for consumers. Banks do very little to hide that complexity today. If you think about kind of stacks of paperwork, using fax machines, phone calls, in-person sessions being required in order to make transactions happen, that used to be okay, and it used to be okay at a time when most people had their guy at the bank. They had their banker, their personal representative, somebody that they'd worked with, by the time they were seeking a home mortgage, that had been their guy at the bank for 20 years, who they felt knew them and could guide them through the process. Today, as cost pressures have changed, new generations have come along, people don't have their guy anymore at a bank. And that means that all of a sudden people are having to decode this whole complex, scary ecosystem for themselves. As I think about fintech and fintech lending in particular, I think about three key sources of that complexity. The first being regulation. I would imagine most people in this room think a lot about regulation. The second being long learning cycles, and the third being partnership with established players and having to kind of integrate into the tech stacks that exist out there. When I was first starting out in fintech lending, somebody told me it's really easy to start a lending business. Anyone can give money away. It's really hard to scale a lending business. Very few people get paid back. And the reality is, even that's not true. It's actually very hard to give money away in a legal and compliant way in our country. Fintech lenders and fintech in general, I think, exists to eliminate or at least try to hide for consumers or help consumers navigate all of this complexity. As a little added color, in our day-to-day here at Bread, we think about FICRA, we think about AML KYC, we think about fair lending, we even think about HIPAA, we think about ADA. You start layering acronym on acronym on acronym, and all of a sudden it's really easy to have an incredibly ugly, complex, hard-to-use product. We also have to do a lot of investment today in edge case handling. So if you think about kind of your average consumer startup, it is totally fine for them to have a dead end for 5% of their customers, right? If 5% of their customers wind up on we're sorry, there's nothing we can do for you page. That's no problem. They've just lost 5% of potential upside, but you can absolutely test and learn quickly in that environment. In a regulated space like fintech and like fintech lending, we don't have the option of doing it wrong for some customers. It's very easy to suddenly find yourself on the wrong side of a regulator when you make calls like that. That's part of what leads to these long learning cycles, in that you have to really think through a lot of your edge cases, even before going live with your first consumer experience. And also, I think this is true in a number of fintech spaces, it takes a long time to learn. Right? Because we don't make our money up front. We didn't get to charge somebody for the product and then deliver the product. We have to actually deliver the product and then hope that they pay us back for it over time. And if you think about, even wealth management, lots of other areas of fintech, there's a similar kind of long horizon for payback that you're thinking about. And one mistake early in your consumer conversion funnel can actually then change who's coming in and can change your ultimate outcomes down the road. And lastly, I'll talk a little bit about partnership with established players. I see this as both one of the biggest opportunities and one of the biggest challenges for fintech entrants. So thinking about Bread today, we partner with Cross River Bank, who is an incredible partner. It's our ability, they enable us to lend in all 50 states, as opposed to having to go through the whole state charter route. But they also are heavily regulated themselves and have all of the complexity that comes with the bank. So if you think about something as simple as launching a consumer survey, we have to run that by them. It takes them, a week to 2 weeks to think about it and turn it around. And then hopefully they approve it and we can actually do the survey. So you're just starting to talk about a lot of interactions with older school players who don't work on technology kinds of timelines. So when you want to really put the tech in fintech, you're bearing all of that complexity and having to do it with grace and speed. However, to me, that's the most exciting thing about being in fintech, is that if you can successfully find a way to navigate all of this complexity and do it in a way that feels simple, intuitive, and easy to use for a consumer, there are incredible opportunities to create scalable differentiation and to maintain that differentiation over time. I think that fintech lending companies and even fintech more broadly exist and win explicitly to make that complexity appear simple. So I'm going to walk you through an example of how Bread is doing and thinking about that today. So this was Bread v maybe 1.5. So somebody was on an e-commerce merchant site. They were on the product details page, browsing a couch, and they saw, pay $1,200 or pay $200 a month. And they clicked on the link, and this popped up. And this modal was the entirety of our application, which already is, if you compare that to like a mortgage application or the experiences a lot of people go through on lending, we've stripped it down a lot. But even this was fairly high friction. So we were seeing that about half of our customers took one look at this and ran for the hills. Even customers who've been interested enough in financing to click on a link that said pay in dollars per month. Our hypothesis was that if we could find ways to even further simplify this, we could have some pretty dramatic increases in conversion. And the challenge was we actually need all of this data. We need all of this data to make a good, sound credit decision, and we definitely need all of this data before making a loan to fulfill all of our regulatory requirements. So to start with, we did a very simple test where we actually just said, hey, what if this was all that we had to ask for? What if all we needed was name, cell, and email address, and we could make a credit decision off of that? What would that do? Would that actually be powerful? And then as soon as people filled that out, we took them right onto the second page where we asked for all the data we'd always been asking for. And we saw that we were estimated we could drive between a 15 and 18% lift in conversion if this was all that we had to ask for. So, really meaningful double-digit numbers on our conversion funnel. And at the same time, we saw that actually even splitting the page in two, making it feel more approachable at the beginning, drove material conversion impact. So we saw a 3 to 5% lift in conversion literally just from having it on 2 pages instead of 1. So kind of given this learning and given the fact that really our core focus is always on conversion and how we can drive more people through the funnel, we decided to spend some material time figuring out if there was a way that we could make a lending decision off of just these 4 fields. After about a year of experimenting with data, back testing, running all kinds of things in shadow logging mode behind the scenes, we were able to, and we'll be launching later this month, an experience where this is our application. Now, on the surface, if I were like a product designer, I'd say literally you took a couple fields away, guys. Like this is not that big of a change. But the impact of not having to ask for date of birth and social, we believe A is going to be really powerful for conversion, but B is actually going to make customers feel less uneasy, right? This is a less onerous and really less of a mental load to say, hey, let's even see what I could qualify for. And then we will validate their phone number, which we do today. and we should be able to get them immediately onto loan terms. This works about 70% of the time. For the other 30% of the time, we'll take them to that second page experience and have them continue with that. But for the 70%, we will have hopefully meaningfully reduced their cognitive load. Now, what we have to do though, again, kind of regulatory environment being what it is, we still have to ask for all of the data points that we were originally and have them in self-reported form. So even though we're deriving it, even though we're able to get to estimates of those values for most of our consumers, we're gonna have to ask them to self-report. So we are in a sense just moving friction down the line, but when we do that, and we'll be adding date of birth and last four of social to the review screen. Our hope is that having moved the carrot that this far up in the funnel, when people are thinking about not give me your social so I can tell you if you'll get money, but give me your social so that you can have access to $1,400 or $5,000, that most of the funnel lift that we will have achieved won't be counterbalanced by drop off here. But we won't actually know that, kind of back to the long learning cycles point, until this is live in the wild. So just to kind of wrap, how Bread manages complexity. So I think this is emblematic of how we think through this complicated space that we're trying to make simple. So first, we do a lot of rapid testing around data quality. I think data is core and key to what we do, and there are lots of ways to do that in the background that don't require kind of any of the oversight or regulatory compliance that we have on the front end. We do a lot of anonymized testing. So because of the need to pass through third parties and get approval for tests that we want to run, we do a lot of our testing unbranded. It's not too much of an issue for us because we're a fundamentally white labeled company, but I see that that could be potentially challenging for a company where their brand is a big part of the value prop. And last, we literally sit with our risk and compliance teams. Product engineering, risk, and compliance sit in one room because that's how tight that partnership has to be. So that was all I was going to cover. Thank you guys so much for the time and for listening. I would love to speak with any of you that are wrestling with similar challenges and thinking through kind of this, how do you test, how do you learn, how do you grow quickly in a complicated space, and how do you make complicated backends simple on the front end. And last, the obligatory plug, we are hiring and we're hiring fast, so if anybody is here thinking about what's next, I'd love to talk to you. Thanks.